I never imagined that one ordinary evening could turn into the kind of memory that haunts you for weeks. You know the kind. The kind you replay in your head over and over, trying to make sense of what just happened. It all started with what I thought would be a simple, friendly dinner. Nothing fancy, no big plans. Just me, a few colleagues from work, and a warm invitation from someone I trusted more than I should have. I remember walking up to the apartment that night, carrying a bottle of wine, feeling that little flutter of excitement that comes when you think you're about to have a relaxing evening. The door opened before I could even knock, and there she was, Claire, with that effortless smile that made everything feel lighter. She waved me in like I was expected, like this was normal, like nothing could possibly go wrong. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and something else I couldn't quite place, something off. But I shook it off. I told myself I was just being silly, imagining things that weren't there. The other guests were already there, laughing and chatting, their voices bouncing off the walls. It all seemed so ordinary, so safe. I even made a joke about how serious everyone looked when they discussed work, and for a moment, the tension melted into the clinking of glasses and easy conversation. I felt like I belonged, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But there was something subtle in the way Claire moved around the room, something in her eyes that didn't quite match her smile. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my stomach twisted for reasons I couldn't explain. As the night went on, the conversation got lighter, the wine flowed, and I started to relax. And that's when it happened, the first flicker. A tiny, almost insignificant flicker of light above us. I laughed nervously, assuming it was just the old wiring. But then it happened again, stronger this time, and the shadows in the room shifted in ways that made me pause. I looked at Claire, trying to read her expression, but she just laughed it off like nothing was wrong. "Old building," she said, pouring herself another glass. But I couldn't shake the unease crawling along my spine. There's a certain instinct you feel when something is off, and mine was screaming at me. I kept glancing at the lights, trying to convince myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting. And then, without warning, the entire apartment went dark. Complete darkness. No hum of the fridge, no distant city noise, nothing but an overwhelming, suffocating black. The laughter stopped. Glasses clinked once, and then silence. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a power outage. Something about the darkness felt deliberate, personal. And before I could even process it, a sound, soft, deliberate, echoed somewhere in the room. I froze. My heart was hammering so loud I thought it might give me away. And then I heard it again, closer this time. Something I wasn't ready to face. I wished I could turn back time, wish I had never walked through that door. But it was too late. The night had begun, and whatever was coming, I had no idea how to stop it. I had known Claire for a few months through work, nothing serious, just casual friendly chats over coffee and occasional group lunches. She had this energy that made people relax around her, and I thought of her as safe, trustworthy. But now, standing in the dark with her apartment silent except for that strange, deliberate sound, I wasn't so sure anymore. The other guests were coworkers I barely knew. Mark, the guy who always made the sarcastic comments at meetings, Sophie, quiet, almost too polite, and Daniel, who seemed friendly but had a way of watching people that made me slightly uncomfortable. Normally, we all laughed together, joked about office gossip, and left at a reasonable hour. That night, though, it was different. Claire had insisted we stay late, said she had a special menu planned, and that she wanted it to feel more intimate. I hadn't thought much of it back then. Now, I couldn't help but wonder why she needed us there, all of us, together, on that exact night. Even before the lights went out, there had been small things. The way the shadows in the room seemed to cling to corners, moving oddly as if the walls themselves were breathing. The way Claire's laugh didn't reach her eyes sometimes, like a mask she wore to cover something else. I noticed the way Mark kept glancing at the door, Sophie fiddled with her bracelet constantly, and Daniel. Daniel just stayed too quiet, too still, as if he already knew something we didn't. I tried to shake it off, telling myself people have quirks, that nerves show differently on everyone. But in the back of my mind, a tiny voice kept whispering that this night would change everything. I thought about the walk to her apartment, the small talk, the jokes about traffic, the smell of vanilla mixed with something heavier, lingering, like smoke or an unwashed corner. Even the way the elevator had creaked felt wrong, like it was protesting our arrival. Everything seemed minor at the time, but now it felt like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to see. And Claire. I tried to read her in that darkness. The faint outlines of her face glimmered in the city lights sneaking through the window, but it wasn't enough. She spoke softly, "Everyone okay?" But there was an edge in her voice I couldn't place. She sounded almost relieved. Relieved that the power went out, or relieved that something else had begun. My pulse quickened. We were all in the middle of something I didn't understand. I could feel tension radiating off the others, their whispered names barely audible as they tried to make sense of the sudden blackness. Nobody moved, nobody dared speak too loudly. Each sound, the soft clatter of a glass, the shifting of feet, seemed magnified, making me more aware of how exposed we were. And in that silence, I realized something I couldn't ignore. Someone, or something, was watching us. The air grew heavy, thick, as though the apartment itself was holding its breath. I wanted to reach for my phone, but the faint hope of light, of clarity, held me back. Because in this darkness, I knew the night wasn't over. And whatever was about to happen next would leave none of us the same. The darkness pressed down on us, heavier than any blackout I had ever experienced. Every small sound felt amplified, the soft scrape of a chair leg against the floor, the nervous coughs, the shuffling of feet. My heart thumped so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I wanted to laugh at myself for being so jumpy, but it wasn't just nerves anymore. Something in the apartment felt wrong. Claire's voice cut through the silence again, a little too calm. "Maybe it's just the fuse. Let's not panic." But her eyes didn't match her words. They flicked toward the corner of the room, then back at me, almost too quickly. I realized I wasn't just scared of the dark. I was scared of what we couldn't see. Mark whispered something under his breath, but I didn't catch it. Sophie clutched her bracelet tighter, her knuckles white. Daniel stayed frozen, silent, like he was calculating what to do next, or maybe waiting for something to happen. And then, I felt it. The air shifted, subtle but undeniable, like a weight moving through the room. My gut screamed that we were no longer just guests at a friendly dinner. I tried to reach for my phone, but my hands trembled too much. The faint glow from the city outside offered almost no comfort. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting into shapes that weren't really there, or maybe they were. I couldn't tell anymore. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath, but every instinct in me told me to run. And yet, the door was behind us, and something about the way it felt, locked or held, made me hesitate. Then it happened. A soft, deliberate noise, like a fingernail dragging slowly across wood, echoed somewhere in the apartment. Not near the door, not near the windows. Somewhere in the dark. We all froze. Claire's laugh from before, warm and inviting, had vanished. Now she simply stood there, barely moving, staring at the shadows as if she were expecting them to move on their own. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask what was happening, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, my voice swallowed by the darkness. Something, or someone, was in the room with us, and suddenly, the realization hit me. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. Whatever had caused the lights to go out was waiting, and it knew we were here. A sudden creak echoed from the far corner of the apartment, just enough to make me flinch. And then, just as quickly, silence swallowed the room again. But I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that the calm wouldn't last. Not for long. Every second felt stretched, each heartbeat hammering like a warning drum. The apartment was no longer familiar. The walls seemed closer, the shadows sharper, as if the darkness itself had grown teeth. Nobody moved, but the tension was electric, thick enough to choke on. I could hear my own pulse, fast and uneven, echoing in my ears. The others were silent too, but their fear was tangible. You could feel it pressing in from every corner, vibrating in the air like some unspeakable signal. Claire's voice finally came again, quieter this time. "We should stay calm." Her words were soft, but they didn't comfort anyone. In fact, the way she said it, almost rehearsed, almost too controlled, made me more suspicious. I kept thinking about those fleeting moments earlier, when her eyes didn't match her smile. Something had been off that night, and now, in this darkness, it felt amplified. Then the sound returned. Soft at first, a faint scratching, as if someone, or something, was tracing the edges of the room. It wasn't close enough to pinpoint, but it was deliberate, patient. My chest tightened. Sophie whimpered softly and flinched against the wall. Mark cursed under his breath, though even his bravado sounded strained. Daniel. I couldn't read him. He was still frozen, silent, his eyes wide in the darkness, staring at a corner I couldn't see. I wanted to say something, to take charge, but fear made me clumsy. My hands shook as I reached toward the nearest table for anything to use as a weapon, but there was nothing. The bottle of wine I had brought rattled when I picked it up, and it sounded deafening in the silence. Claire's gaze flicked to it, and then back to me, her expression unreadable. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just a guest in her own home tonight. She was part of whatever was happening. A sudden, sharp movement made me jump. Something darted across the edge of my vision, too quick to see clearly, but unmistakable. The others gasped. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the sound of my own voice seemed foreign, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. My mind raced. Was it just a rat? A trick of the shadows? Or something worse? Every rational thought was smothered by instinct. Run, hide, survive. The scratching grew louder, circling us, and I could feel the fear radiating from everyone else. Sophie pressed against the wall, muttering a prayer I couldn't hear. Mark kept glancing toward the door, as if calculating whether we could make a break for it. And then a whisper, barely audible, deliberate, coming from somewhere near the far corner. Not a person's voice. Something else. Something cold, calm, and knowing. We all froze. No one moved. I could feel my own throat closing with dread. Whatever it wasn't finished. It was waiting, watching. And then, just when I thought I might lose my mind from fear, a sudden, unmistakable sound, a soft, metallic click, echoed behind me. I turned instinctively, and that's when I saw it. Or at least, I thought I did. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I thought I saw, but the darkness seemed to twist around itself. Then, in a flash of movement, everything changed. It wasn't just a shadow, not just a trick of the light. Someone, or something, was inside the room with us, but it wasn't one of us. Claire stepped forward suddenly, her voice calm, almost eerily serene. "You shouldn't have come," she said, and the words sent a chill straight through my spine. I froze. This wasn't the friend I thought I knew. Mark's eyes widened, Sophie gasped, and Daniel finally moved, but it wasn't towards safety. It was like he knew more than the rest of us. Before I could even process it, the metallic click returned, this time accompanied by a soft mechanical hum. And then I realized, it wasn't just darkness we were trapped in. Something had locked the doors from the outside. And the whispers, they weren't coming from the shadows. They were coming from Claire. Her smile returned, but now it was different, calculated, dangerous. And in that instant, I understood. The night we thought was ordinary was never meant to be ordinary at all. And whatever she had planned for us was far worse than any of us could imagine. The room felt alive, almost breathing, as the darkness pressed in on us from all sides. Claire's calm, predatory smile made my stomach twist into knots. We weren't just guests anymore. We were participants in something she controlled, something she had planned long before we walked through that door. Mark tried the door again. Locked. Sophie backed into the wall, her eyes wide with terror. Daniel's gaze never left Claire, like he was waiting for a cue, and suddenly, I realized he wasn't afraid. He was complicit. My heart pounded. How many of them were part of this? A faint light flickered from the ceiling, and I caught a glimpse of Claire's hand holding a small device, an ordinary-looking remote. But with it, she had plunged us into chaos. The metallic hum grew louder, echoing in the room like a warning. "You shouldn't have ignored the signs," she said softly, stepping closer. Her words felt like knives. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. Instinct screamed at me, but the room had become a trap. And then it happened. A sudden crash, the chandelier above swaying violently, sending shards of glass tinkling to the floor. Mark lunged forward instinctively, trying to grab something for protection, and in that split second, I realized the truth. Claire had orchestrated everything. The flickering lights, the whispered sounds, even the subtle tension we ignored. Sophie screamed, a sharp, piercing sound, and I felt my chest tighten. Daniel moved, but not toward us. He went straight to Claire, almost reverently. My mind raced, heart hammering. Were they working together? Or was Daniel another victim? Before I could figure it out, Claire pressed a button on the remote. The lights flickered, And suddenly, the apartment wasn't just dark, it was transforming. Shadows stretched unnaturally, walls seemed to warp, and the whispers returned, louder, closer, echoing from nowhere. I froze, gripping the edge of the table. And then, the final twist hit me like ice. Claire's calm, terrifying smile faded, replaced by a look of pure shock. The device wasn't under her control anymore. Something else had taken it, and us, over. The whispers weren't her doing. They never had been. And in that moment, I realized, the night wasn't just about a dinner gone wrong. We were trapped in something far bigger, far older, and far more dangerous than any of us had imagined. The chaos slowly began to settle, though the apartment never truly returned to normal. The shadows receded slightly, the unnatural warping of the walls softened, and the metallic hum faded into silence. But the air still felt heavy, thick with the memory of what had happened. We were alive, but changed. Claire slumped into a chair, her expression finally human again, stripped of the calculated mask she had worn for most of the night. Daniel stayed close to her, still silent, his eyes reflecting confusion and fear. Mark helped Sophie to her feet, both of them trembling but relieved that the immediate danger seemed to have passed. I stood in the center of the room, still trying to catch my breath, my mind racing through every detail. None of it made sense, and yet every instinct told me we had just survived something unimaginable. I don't understand, Claire whispered, finally breaking the silence. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I thought I could control it. Her voice trembled. For the first time that night, I realized she wasn't just the orchestrator. She had been as much a victim as the rest of us. Something ancient, something beyond her comprehension, had intervened. Daniel finally spoke. "We got lucky," he said quietly. "Whatever it was, it wanted something from all of us. But it let us go for now." His words sent shivers down my spine. We had survived, but the sense of normalcy we had counted on was gone. The world outside those walls would never feel the same again. Mark broke the silence with a nervous laugh, attempting to lighten the mood. "Well, anyone up for coffee?" Sophie gave a small, shaky smile, but it felt hollow. None of us could laugh the way we had before. And I realized something important. Life doesn't always give you clear answers. Sometimes, you survive, and that's the only certainty. As we finally left the apartment, the city lights felt different. Warmer, perhaps, because we could see them. Safer, because we were still breathing. But a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't truly escaped. The night had left its mark on us, not just in memory, but in instinct. I knew I would never be the same again. And yet, in the quiet moments, when I think back, I understand something profound. Fear has a way of revealing who we truly are. It strips away pretenses, exposes hidden strength, and forces you to confront yourself in ways ordinary life never could. That night, I learned that trust is fragile, danger can wear familiar faces, and courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it anyway. As I walk home alone now, I can't help but glance at the lights and windows around me. I know the darkness still exists, waiting, watching, but I also know that surviving it has changed me. And somehow, in that knowledge, there is hope. Because sometimes, the scariest nights teach you the most about yourself.